So we're coming up to the end of this year now, and going into next year, I'm thinking about like what we want to achieve for the next year, what we have achieved so far, and I just want to go over some things with you and have a little sit-down chat. I'm not going to edit the hell out of this video. I'm just going to let it be authentic and real, because half the time I feel like I'm being myself, but I'm not allowing my own sense of humour or my own sense of self to come through, because I'm so focused on delivering this information to you that I feel like I hold back and I stick to a script. So I wanted to just try something here, and I watched Dylan obviously release his last video quite successfully, go on a bit of a tangent, if you will, and I suspect he'll be far more on point with what he's saying. I suspect I will descend into a slight ramble here, but I also wanted to get across a lot of things to you lot that I don't feel like we get across properly. So there's a myriad of things that I want to go through here, but I'm just going to let myself go into it without any script, and we'll see where we get with that. We'll see who's here at the end, shall we? So the big thing that I've been reflecting upon this year, and Ellie coming in and becoming a part of Reptiles and Research has been a big part of it, is that, you know, when I first started this was all about like driving the hobby forward, figuring out the best things possible, using science, using an evidence-based approach to figuring out reptile care, and that is still core to my beliefs. That is still the thing that I wake up, I think about in the morning, and I go to sleep, struggle to go to sleep because my brain is still spiraling, thinking about things. So it drives me now, but I feel like the more and more we get into this, and the more that I work in a reptile shop. If you don't know, I work in a reptile shop on the south coast. It's one of the biggest reptile shops in the country. It's got the most diverse collection of Cyclura in Europe. It's got crocodile monitors. It's got crested Fijian iguanas. Like, it's quite an impressive collection. And I've been working there since sort of February, and I worked at previous reptile shops. My point being is that I've been working face to face with people, and I've had more opportunities to figure out the best way to come at angles to convince someone, do you get that UV light? Or maybe you should convince someone to do this, that, and that. And I've obviously tried different methods to convince people to do different things. And I look back at some of the first videos, and I'll watch them back, and I'll honestly say that I don't feel like I had the best approach. I feel like the passion really did bleed through, and I feel like if passion isn't bleeding through in these videos, I feel like people wouldn't be on board with the message and the mission. So I felt the passion bleed through, but when I look back at it now, I watch these videos and I see frustration. You know, my tactic was to obviously go at it and point out, like, going by this and the 5 animal needs, blah blah blah, this is why you're doing this, which is actually not achieving welfare. And when you do that, you're making a big statement to a lot of people. There'll be people that obviously agree with that and are like, yeah, say it how it is. And then there's other people who will watch that thinking, oh, dude, does something need UV? And then they'll go, oh, like if you make someone feel shit, they don't go, you're right, thank you for telling me. What actually happens is someone goes, nah, I'm not listening to this. Why would I listen to this rubbish when I can go elsewhere and watch 10 other channels tell me that what I'm doing is perfectly fine and that this person's crazy, you know? So emotionally, why would you expect someone to be like, yeah, do you know what, you're right? And some people have. I was never calling anyone a piece of shit. I've always been far more diplomatic than that. But I do feel like some earlier videos maybe pointed a finger whilst also suggesting the way forward. It kind of went like a point finger and go that way. And there's many examples of like working with customers at work where I'm like, I could have easily said, well, this and this is why you're doing your animal a disservice. But it doesn't make the person go, alright, I'll buy it. That makes the person go, I ain't listening to you. So when you put someone on the back foot, you've already halfway lost them. And I don't feel like I always was that way. And I don't feel like I intentionally was like, right, let's send people spiraling backwards on the back foot, because that's how you get people defensive, and that's how you get people fighting the information rather than like internally accepting it and thinking about how they can incorporate it. And there's plenty of examples where someone maybe wasn't going to buy that UV for that raw python or something, or for that boa, where I've said, this is completely your choice, but a ball python has the cones in their eyes to see into the ultraviolet spectrum. So therefore, if you provide them with that light, they will actually be able to see things they've never seen before. And they'll see their environment in a whole new way. And then the customer was like, well, when you put it that way, yeah, I'll have it. So that wasn't about going from the angle of you're doing it a disservice by not having it. That was the angle of this is what you could do with it. This is what you could do for your animal by doing it. It was almost like dangling the carrot rather than cracking the whip, if that makes sense. An example would be like when I made the video, ball pythons, are they semi-arboreal? I still stand by what I said. The science is there. The definition of semi-arboreal is frequenting trees, but not necessarily living in them. And an arboreal was living in a tree. So by definition, a ball python is semi-arboreal. And obviously, Luca Lucilli defined them such, and he's the bloke who spent 30 years in the world studying them. So I don't have any quarrel with that. But then I watch it back where I said, like, therefore they want to climb and do this, and I've shown them in the position they sit in, curled up on the branch like a green tree python, and say that these behaviours are there because obviously they evolved to know that and be able to do that. Like, you don't get like a Calabar python, which is very, very fossorial, actually curling up on a branch like that, because they don't have it in their head as a evolved behaviour to express. So therefore, the raw pythons clearly are taken to the branches. But if I look at that, I turn around and said, so therefore, you aren't meeting their welfare needs by not allowing them to climb, or by keeping it in a rack or a tub or in whatever situation. I do sometimes think, like, maybe if I didn't turn around and then make people feel shit for it, maybe if I just dangled the carrot, maybe it would have achieved more, and it would have actually helped more pythons, because maybe it wouldn't have made someone feel like they had to go on the back foot and reject the premise. Otherwise, if they accept it, they feel guilt for not doing so. And if they're in a position where they can't do that because they've got too much now, without previously having this information, they can't make the change. It's much easier to reject the premise or reject the information and accept easier to digest information that maybe makes them feel better than obviously to realise that their raw python potentially is missing out on a whole part of its evolutionary behaviour that it doesn't get to express. So there's a part of me that's like, even though I was right, I was 100% right, that is what the science says. It's so point blank and blunt that maybe there's a more diplomatic way of saying it that actually achieves more. So I've been pondering on a lot of that over the past year, and I don't know if you've noticed that subtle changes I've been putting into that, how the message comes across and whatnot. And obviously Ellie has been a big part of that. Ellie isn't in this video because it's just me rambling, and just getting out what I want to put out. But obviously since me and Ellie started going out, but when you talk about things, like I have this conversation with Ellie, I'm like, when you watch that video, like, what reaction comes out of it? How does that make you feel? And things like guilt, then you feel like shit because maybe you are stuck in a situation where you can't make the change. You know the information, but you can't make it yet. And let's be clear, Ellie's got a master's in zoo biology, so Ellie is far smarter than me. She's more qualified than me. So someone that knows the information but actually has animals that can't financially change it yet still feels like this immense negative reaction to the video. So imagine how someone feels when they don't have the maybe academic background to look at the information and what I've said and look at the studies and come to the same conclusion, be like, do you know what, you're right. So imagine what it feels like when you're someone that doesn't have that ability through no fault of their own, and then watches that video and it hears that message, and imagine what they feel. They're going to feel the same things Ellie felt, that guilt and, oh, that's really hard to hear, and of course they're going to go elsewhere and accept a message that's easier to digest and tells them what they're doing is okay. And it's not to do with like whether it's okay, it's to do with whether that's the end goal. Because if you go somewhere and it says, yeah, what you're doing is the end goal for ball pythons, and that there is nothing in their brains and that's all they do and they want to burrow, that makes you feel better. That makes you feel like you've achieved all there is to achieve for that ball python, for example. And I sometimes feel like, well, maybe I didn't help those people in the way that I could have helped. Because like I started all of this because I wanted to help everyone and their animals. So yes, we're barreling forward and like trying to fine tune things to be as perfect as possible and as in line with the up-to-date information, but maybe we're just, the angles that I went with left people behind, where maybe instead of going barreling forward and like pushing people away from the message, maybe we should be like dangling the carrot and be like, you know, get up to this stage and baby steps, this stage and this stage. And like I said, it's all about progression, like Dylan says. And here's the thing, I was always saying it's all about progression, all this the entire time, but then wasn't recognizing that it potentially in my message, the messaging may have been different. Because obviously I come from a background where it was all zoo stuff and it was all academic, and it was like, this p-value equals this, is this statistically significant, blah, blah, blah. And it was very clinical, and there was no emotion to it because it was science. And then when I stepped into all of this and tried to bring in the science, maybe I was too clinical. Maybe like there wasn't that diplomatic, what emotion arises from this, and that psychology wasn't there. So that is a whole separate skill set that I feel like I'm slowly developing, and that power of persuasion and dangling the carrot that wasn't there before. So that's one big learning curve for me personally in trying to do this. Because it will always be my mission, and it will always be what I want to do, and I can never see myself doing anything but trying to help as many animals as possible. Like, I literally wake up thinking about it, and I literally struggle to go to sleep at night. And me and Ellie just talk all day about it. Like, Ellie's sister was like, all you two talk about is snakes. And we're like, yes. It's all obviously we don't, but I mean, like, it's constantly on our heads, and like, with how can we do this to help, and blah blah blah. And let's be clear, with Ellie's snakes, it was things like she used to work at Pets at Home, and someone would have this royal and just dump it out the front of Pets at Home, and they'd be like, well, what do we do with this? And it'll be something skinny, and like even that basic level of tub care was needed to help with that animal. But Ellie recognised that that animal needed help, and that if it took a tub to do that, then obviously that makes sense. And Ellie had a period of taking on the unwanted and whatnot. So, and it's not like I would have done any different. If someone was like, "Here's this raw python, I'm dumping it on your doorstep. It's knackered, it's got burn marks, it's scabby, it's skinny. I've only got 5 vivs." As if I would turn it away and not put it in a rub and try and rehabilitate it. I can't speak. I even did it where I came across a royal that was skinny, and their method of feeding was smacking it in the face with a rat to try and like anger it to get it to strike and coil and like defeat this opponent, sort of thing. And what actually happened was that this raw python actually developed a fear of rats and would not eat them. So every time you went to feed it, obviously it would smell the rat and then just go into a defensible position. And then obviously they were just trying to feed the rat over and over and over and over again. And obviously this royal was just getting skinnier and skinnier and skinnier, and it looked like a Toblerone at one point. It was so triangular. And then even I was like, "Ellie, do you want to take on this royal?" And then she took it. So I contributed towards that. And I just wonder how many people are in that position where they've done a good thing, by potentially saving an animal's life, and then they're stuck now because they have all these animals that they are unable to get the biggest enclosure for because of space, time, and money. But also they've got an emotional attachment to that animal now as well. Like, imagine an animal that you've rehabilitated that have previous psychological problems, that you've given it that gentle care and that gentle approach and retreat to allow it to feel safe again, to eat different things and not boil up constantly. And then to say, yeah, I'm going to move this on elsewhere. And then you completely release control of an animal that you know that the majority of keepers do not have the eye to go, okay, it's defensive, we'll back off. We'll come back, and then incrementally give a little bit of stress and then habituate it to more and more and more in that way that, say, Laurie Torini describes. Most keepers don't have that ability, which is a shame. So to say to someone, just hand it out into the ether, not knowing that the bridges you had to build and the trust you had to build in that animal again, just to send it out somewhere that potentially could go back to square one, where people just like want to handle it constantly and, oh yeah, it's in a ball because that's what ball pythons do and whatnot. And I just look back on things and I'm like, I could have had baby steps in here, and potentially, rather than like only just creating content for like the best possible scenario, maybe we should make baby step content for also there's people that are first coming into the hobby and they're like, why won't my snake eat? What to do basic care for a ball python. And maybe I should make videos, maybe we should make videos about like, here's really basic, and then here's a progression ladder over time, how we get from here to here to here to here and here, and then slowly transition that animal upwards, but also your own skill set as a keeper, because no one walks into just keeping bioactive or understanding the complexity or function behind how you place a piece of cork and like the different types of infrared and whatnot. So there's something, a comment like Chaz made when he came on to the channel, where he was like, we need to make sure we don't climb the ladder but then pull up the bottom rung beneath us to not allow people to come up. And that's the sort of content that I still want to delve into as well. I mean, like, even if you take the baseline upwards, and you take an animal that was like in a rub with a water bowl to an animal that was in a rub with a water bowl to a hide, to an animal that was in a rub in a water bowl to a hide, to branches that are going from either end of the enclosure to allow it to lift its body off the floor, to engage in just that little bit of muscle activation to, it's not fully climbing, but it's doing more than just sat there, to ones kept in rubs that get to come out and explore, the ones kept in rubs that get to come out and go into like the big fabric playpens like Laurie does, like Green Root Pythons does. And that is the framework shift that I want to make going into 2022. It's all about optimizing how we can make the welfare in the hobby better, but also what is the optimal steps to increasing that. Like Chaz said in that episode we recorded, like, the hobby is a oil tanker. It's not a speedboat. You can't do a U-turn. It has to slowly turn to make any real traction. And like I said, I ponder on this like literally day and night. Like, I have I have a problem. Like, I can't not think about it. And in a way, it's obsessive. Like, I even let like a past relationship die because I was so tunnel vision about this mission that I want to achieve in life and this thing that I'm dedicating myself to, that I just got so tunnel visioned and got the blinkers on that, like, that was my mission and that was it. And then I met someone like Ellie who wants to see the same and wants the same things and wants the same life. And I am the happiest I've ever been in my life at this point in time. But I also want to achieve more. And like, I want to get to the end of it all, built something that's not just a YouTube channel, that's like an organization that puts out the content that's needed, that puts out the resources that's needed to help people, to build an infrastructure in the hobby of education, to go from what feels like the wild, wild west of the hobby to something more structured, that has an infrastructure all the way down to the grassroots. And my ambitions with it all are so large, long term, that I feel like I just need to find the optimal way to help as many animals as possible. And that includes helping the people as best as possible in the best psychological way. And I've already got into a ramble, I can feel it. But so Ellie joins, and Ellie comes to the channel, and instantly I feel like Ellie brought a softer side to Reptiles and Research that was needed. Like, I was very like hard, like and I feel like Ellie's come in with like that softer side that was probably needed for a lot of people to enjoy it more. I mean, there's plenty of you that have left comments about how much of an improvement that Ellie's made to the channel, so I love that. I think it's brilliant. And I love the fact that me and my girlfriend get to do this, and we're doing it together, and it's brilliant. It actually is really, really brilliant. I love it. But obviously Ellie is not combative at all. Ellie's the least combative person that I know. So Ellie tones it down a bit, but also she didn't want to be associated with some of the more combative stuff. So if you notice, if you go back for the channel, a lot of things that I've started slowly privating, and there's a lot of past videos that I want to remake with the same information, the same message, but just that slight tweak to the framework, to how it's been portrayed and how it's coming across, and just build a better future going to 2023. And we have so much ambition of what we want to achieve. We want to go to Africa, we want to go to Australia, we want to go show you things in the way that we want to show it, and we want to look for data in the way that we want to look for it, because we got that academic scientific mind to show things that are really important, and not just gloss over it for the sake of it. But we need to get our foundations correct to feel that we aren't leaving everyone behind, where it's like us versus them. And 100% hands up, 100% slipped into the us versus them attitude completely. Like, absolutely us versus them. It was the advancing lot versus the tub people, and I completely slipped into that. 100%, that was me. And you will see that in the early messaging potentially if you read into it, or maybe you don't need to read into it. Maybe it's blatantly obvious to you. We have this vision for the future, what we want to achieve this YouTube channel. Like, we don't want to keep the money for ourselves. We want to live comfortably. Let's be honest. We want to live comfortably. I want to make this full time. I would love this to be my job, but we also want to do studies. We want to have a room where we could put like X amount of raw python hatchlings and tests. Does the acceptance versus refusal rate for rodent prey versus avian prey, say quail chicks, is that different? And that would have to be kept in the exact same way, with a large enough sample size, with royals that are genetically similar, so there isn't like genetic dispositions that we don't know about, that are probably siblings, to make it like exclude as much variables as possible, kept at the same level. So I couldn't even have like bam 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 bam, because the air temperature is different, and potentially that's a variable like influencing whether one will reject or not reject food. So we need the space, time and money to achieve huge things, to not only just be like, oh yeah, this person says this and this has worked well for them. Let's start seriously testing things, applying the scientific method, and actually start getting some real data going. But to do that, we need money. We need money. I've been so I've been so worried for so long that like everyone is gonna think that I'm a money grabber, or like it's not about the animals, it's about him, and he's just saying that to like extract money out of you, sort of thing. And there are people that will say that now, and I'm like, let's be clear, this channel it makes nothing. It makes, let's be like exact numbers, £70 a month from Patreon and probably £50 a month from ad revenue. So we're not even making £200 a month mark. So it's not as if this is some like money scheme where it's like, yeah, advancing welfare, let's make money, loads of money out of this. If anything, we're having the opposite problem, because our niche of people that want to hear that message is so small. The money we can actually make out to reinvest into it is little compared to those that make videos that are more surface level, but cater to a large array of people that are like the basic getting into it, and I want this information, blah blah blah, and that makes the most money. And this is where we get into our real problem that we're going to try and address for 2023, is that financially this can't go on for much longer. There's a point in time where you're treating this like a full-time job in the hope that it becomes one. But if financially it doesn't become a full-time job, I can't be putting in these like weeks of researching and making videos and editing for hours on end, staying up till 3 a.m. and then going to work the next day. Like, it can't go on for much longer, because the only way someone achieves the things that you want to achieve is with the money and time to do so, and the time and the freedom to actually commit themselves to it and do it in the way that's needed to help everyone and their animals. And I have the same conversation with Animals at Home. Now, I don't know if most people know that Reptiles and Research and Animals at Home is intrinsically linked. Our Patreons are linked. And we have this conversation, and I don't know if Dylan's going to allow me to say this or want me to say it in the way that I'm going to say it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to say it now, and then I'm going to give Dylan the recording, and if he gives it the okay, then what I'm saying now is what's going to come out. If not, we'll make a little snippet here. But Dylan is putting hours upon hours upon hours into the podcast, and there's been comments where people are like, "Oh yeah, well Dylan's a full-time." Like, Dylan is not full-time. Dylan's making no money. Like, me and Dylan make no money. Dylan is paying $500 a month to hire an editor because he's got a baby now and a full-time job. He doesn't have the hours to spend editing, so he had to hire someone just to keep Animals at Home alive. Like, he doesn't have the hours in the day to do it. It's not there. So the only way for him to do that is if it was his job. And like, the conversation me and Dylan had was like, I haven't got much more in me. Like, he's like, how many more years can you keep going? Like, making like $80 a month, like sacrificing personal relationships. Like, I destroyed my relationship, sacrificing personal relationships and like time away from his baby now. Like, the pressure he might be putting on like his wife to take more of the load because he's like committing to this thing that will get there one day. It will get there one day. Dylan needs money. Dylan needs to make this work, or it can't go on for much longer. And I'm not saying like 2 months, but like, how, like, if you say this is a 5-year gig, like, does Dylan have 5 years of like driving himself into the ground? Yes, he's passionate about it. Yes, he loves it. But at what point financially do you start to say, I can't justify it anymore? So this is a conversation that me and Dylan had. Like, we have a thing on Patreon called Keeper Chats, where everyone comes in once a month. We have a Zoom call. It's like a big conference, and it's not too serious all the time. It can be serious if you want the conversation to go serious, but normally just have a nice chat. Everyone's showing off their animals. I'm like, what do you think of this? And we're like, oh, you could do that, this and that. And we share personal stories about ourselves and our lives. And like, we're just chitting and chatting, just chit-chatting. And it's just nice. And then sometimes we're having people like leaders in the industry come on as like a guest, just to allow people to like talk for them for like 2 hours. And it's like, well, where else is anyone doing that, where you get like John Courtney Smith come into like a Zoom call with you? You can just talk to him for 2 hours. Or like Francisco Schieri come in, and you can just talk to him for 2 hours. Or the owner of Custom Reptile Habitats came in for one of them, and he was talking about the business side of the industry and the problems he's seeing and the frustrations he's had and like what possible solutions might be. Like, we're providing something that is insanely valuable. And then we went and looked at like other people's Patreons, and other people were charging like $15 for like their thanks and your name in the credits, and then like they'll send you stickers once a month. And I said to Dylan, it's not the fact that there's no money to help us or there's no money advancing a hobby. It's the fact that we're undervaluing ourselves. It's the fact that we're so got the blinkers on and like trying to help as many animals as possible, and like the mission is there and the money will come at some point. But that some point is now. The money needs to come. So I was saying to him, you're under, like, even like a viewer, when he said like, I don't know how much more there is, like, I watched Animals at Home long before I even started the channel. I was a fan of Animals at Home before I ever got involved. And like when he was saying like, how much longer can you go on for? It's like, that's scary, because I can't imagine a hobby without animals at home in it. Like I was listening to animals at home on the way to work, like whilst cleaning the animals. Like it was a part of my hobby before I even started the channel. So I'm like, Dylan, you need to start like valuing what you're putting out more. By the way, we were charging for that whole thing, getting to talk to the leaders in the industry, blah 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 blah, and just like have a fun time hanging out with people that love reptiles. We're charging like £4 a month for something that other people would probably charge like what, $20 a month, $30 a month. So you look at that and you think, no wonder people are making like their little channels their full-time jobs, and seemingly doing really well and are happy in their message, and they can commit themselves to their work. And if it's something that you feel, Dylan, that is your life's purpose, then why are we so afraid of saying, well, we need to make this our full-time jobs because this is what we want to dedicate ourselves to? Like even myself and Elliot, we talk about this, like I put hours upon hours into research, and I pay for so much, and it all comes out of my own pocket. Everyone thinks that like Reptiles and Research is making money. It's not. Like I spent £1,500 of my own money upgrading all of this just because I wanted a nicer podcast for everyone, just because I wanted to do better. Like the Bearded Dragon deep dive, I've never mentioned, but I'm doing like blood works and stuff. I'm going to be testing like LED UV technology and get the bloods done and see what it does and things like that. So not only am I risking my own animal if potentially it's a dodgy product that actually causes a spike, I've got the fail-safes in there. I've gone through the methodology with like people that are far smarter than I. I'm planning and testing and trying to come up with the best, safest way possible for Nugget as well, because I am not risking my own Bearded Dragon for the work that other people aren't willing to do. But like the bloods cost hundreds, and then to buy the technology itself is like one bulb might be 100, and like you're just pouring so much of your money and yourself into it. And like, well, why am I not valuing myself? Why am I not saying this is what I'm worth when other people are charging $15 a month for stickers? That's like, I am rambling now, and like I'm obviously letting out some frustrations, but I'm also gearing you up to look at when we take things in a new direction and we actually start valuing ourselves. We aren't money grabbing. It's just the fact that we want to survive. We want to survive, and that's all there is to it. Like even the UK, the FBH, like I've helped the FBH with documents, and they've come back there, and I'm like, what about this and this and this? And like I've played like not an advisory role because it's not that serious, but I've played my part in something more formal, bigger than I, and like a big part of the UK hobby. And what have I got to show for it? Like I'm still sat in a bedroom making £80 a month that maybe might cover the cost of Frozen, and I'm just like, what am I doing? I'm trying to build something bigger, but to build something bigger, you need the capital to do so. Having the money to invest in your message and your mission shouldn't be something you feel guilt about. And that's been a big part of wanting to change the way I look at things as well. And also there's two of us now, so £80 doesn't go between like two people. Like we at least need to make like £3,000 a month for both of us to do this full time. And the content we could make if this was a full-time job and the amount of time we could invest into it would be astronomical. Like I have this dream of what we could achieve. Like we want to go to Africa. Can we afford to go to Africa? No, I can't afford to go down the road, especially on this the Reptiles and Research budget, if you will. Yes, I could finance it myself, but like again, like sacrificing personal relationships, your time of your life, like working your ass off. Like people don't realize, and I think YouTube's easy. It's bloody not. Like the amount of stress you feel of like, oh, I have to optimize my time per day, and I'm off this day, so that hour I get home, I'll have I've gotten to the point, right? I'll come home, and let's say someone else cooked dinner this time or whatever, and rather than be like, oh yeah, I'll microwave this and I'll warm it up and eat it, I just ate it cold because I was like rushing upstairs to get in the shower and then like working. Like I don't realise how much of on a treadmill I am, where I'm trying to optimise every second of my day just to try and keep Reptiles and Research going. Like, this has to become my full-time job at some point, or it's done, because, or at least not in the way that it is. You might get like a video once every 3 months or something for the fun of it, and just because I want to play my part, but it's never going to be something that could really be game-changing and help build the infrastructure in the hobby, unless it has the capital to do so. Like, it needs the money to do it. So us and Animals at Home, we're going to be restructuring the way that we do things, and also that our patrons, a Patreon things that we're doing is like, we're going to be doing an exclusive podcast for the Patreon, like a t-shirt club where it's like real designs get sent out each month, and it's not like it's not going to be worth it. It's going to be purely transactional, and we're going to put the value into Patreon that is worth it. So if you start seeing us talk about like, this is our Patreon goal to get this amount of money, we're offering this, please join the Patreon, this is where it's all happening, guests from podcast episodes are going to join us in this month's Keep a Chat. So if you want to join a Zoom call and chat with the guest from last episode and you've got questions you want to ask, now is your time to do so. Obviously I can't look at other creators and be like, oh yeah, they're not putting the energy in, because I don't know what they're doing behind the scene. They could be busting their ass off. But also, if this is a mission that you also believe in, and this is core to what you feel about the hobby, then I don't feel any guilt anymore about valuing what we're trying to do. So that is something that we're going to go ahead and do. We're going to start valuing ourselves more. And we're going to try and build an infrastructure that allows us to survive. Imagine having a room dedicated to just performing studies. Like, we've got 30 hatchlings here. Control group A has no UV, and then test group B has UV. And then the environment is set up to exclude variables. What happens? Will we find an increase in weight, an increase in growth? Will they become heavier because their bones are more ossified, because they're more able to utilize the calcium in their prey, which means they are denser? Will they be more active? Will they feed better? How do we get to a stage where we are testing and probing to refine and refine and refine, and not just like, oh yeah, well, sometimes this works for some people and sometimes this works for this. Let's start testing things scientifically, and that's what we want to do. We want to do things like that and probe and probe and probe, and concentrate on the things that are common and popular in the hobby, like your crested gecko, your bearded dragon, your corn snake, your raw python. Things that have the most amount of animals in the hobby, so therefore you're helping the most amount of animals out, and also the most amount of people out if there's more people keeping them, and building an infrastructure that is better for the hobby and also stops it being such an easy target to attack from animal rights groups. As you can tell, I've got a lot spiraling around my head, where I'm just thinking now about what I want to achieve and what we want to achieve, and what us together, as well as Dylan's channel, Animals at Home, want to achieve together. And we want to stand by each other. But if financially one of us is struggling, we need to make sure that our message is valued the same. We're not undercutting each other. So there's a lot of variables into this, like how it works with like being part of the Animals at Home podcast network. Is Dylan pays for all the Apple, and Dylan pays for all the Spotify, because he's already paying to do so for his own channel. But then, so it wouldn't make sense for us to actually like pay for another one just to upload our stuff to. So that's why it's the Animals at Home network. And all I do is just send him the files after we've done creating an episode, and he uploads it and whatnot. So if Dylan goes, right, this is worth this, then we have to match him. Like, we can't undercut him, but we're all in this together. And I suspect we will make a better, more orchestrated, more to the point video about why we're doing what we're doing and what's coming. And I know Dylan is planning to do that, but I wanted to give like a human video that isn't so scripted, and that isn't so like just a narration voice. Like, there's just like the person you're watching explaining why this is happening. And this already bugs me, because I'm so trying to be regimented in narration and produce something polished, that I'm producing something now and I can feel myself rambling, and I'm like, I just want to delete it all. I just want to delete it and then go script it out and then make something new. But I'm going to force myself to upload this with some edits where I went to go do something and came back to it. But you can tell this is very raw and I don't like it, and it makes me uncomfortable. But at the same time, I don't show myself beyond just narrating and delivering information sometimes. So I'm going to see how you lot respond. If you think this is like rubbish, then I know not to do this again. But we'll see. But thank you much. Can't speak. I'm not going to edit that out. It is what it is. I stumbled. It happens. So thank you very much for listening to me ramble. I just wanted to get that message across and explain what's happening, because the change is going to happen, because it has to, or nothing happens ever again. So thank you very much for listening to me ramble. And the next few videos will be more polished and more orchestrated and whatnot. But yeah, thank you very much. Enjoy your animals. Enjoy your Christmas. We've got some Christmas videos coming up. But yeah, thanks for listening to me ramble.